Mr. President, this weekend will mark the beginning of the Memorial Day remembrances that we do every year. Memorial Day, of course, on Monday, but many activities will begin even today and tomorrow to honor those who have died in the defense of our country. These men and women had families, they had dreams for the future, they had their whole lives ahead of them, but they did something extraordinary. I remember, Mr. President, a few years ago, I had the opportunity to be at the American Cemetery at Normandy, and at the end of the guide of the tour of that cemetery, the guide had us set down over on a ledge with the English Channel to our back, and those 8,000 graves in front of us that we had just looked at and talked about the sacrifices made. And then he flipped open his computer, and at that exact same spot on the 20th anniversary of D-Day, General Eisenhower, former President Eisenhower, in 1964 was talking to Walter Cronkite, and he said to Walter Cronkite, he said, you know, Walter, my son John graduated on D-Day, graduated from West Point on D-Day. And over the last 20 years, I've watched he and his wife raise their family and have the experiences they've had. And he said, many times I've thought about these young men and the life they didn't get to lead because of what they were asked to do. And particularly to have the person sitting there 20 years later who ultimately was the person who asked them to do what they were asked to do, and to understand that that's the kind of decision he thought about. It's the kind of sacrifice we should think about as we think about those who didn't get to pursue their dreams, didn't get to see the family they had grow up or have the family they would have liked to have had because they laid down their lives so that we could take care of our families, so that we could realize our dreams, so that we could enjoy the freedoms that our nation is truly blessed with and make us truly extraordinary in our belief and our defense of freedom, not only for ourselves, but for people everywhere. We are grateful for all these people have done, and this is a time of year when we particularly set aside to honor those fallen heroes, the soldiers, the sailors, the airmen, the Marine, the people in the National Guard and the Coast Guard and the Reserve called up and losing their life in that cause. But also it's a good time for us to remember those who served, who were willing to make that sacrifice if necessary, and often have their own burdens they carry from their service. But maybe that burden was just simply losing those years when others were already at a civilian job that they would only be able to go to later. You know, I'm honored, Mr. President, to represent nearly 500,000 Missouri veterans. And as a member of the bipartisan Congressional Veterans Job Caucus, I'm committed to helping our veterans find good paying jobs as civilians. We took an important step in that direction recently when President Trump signed the Honoring Investment in Recruiting and Employing Veterans Act, or the Hire Vets Act. I believe, Mr. President, it may have been the first bill the Senate passed. I was pleased to be the principal sponsor of that bill, and it was the underlying bill on the continuing resolution that funded the government on April the 17th, and so it became law. It addresses the fact that transferring from military to civilian life represents a number of challenges. It represents challenges for our service members, and it can be a difficult personal decision to make that transfer, but it's also difficult to navigate the civilian employment market, to find out who is recognizing the skills and the lessons learned by veterans and who may not be quite at the forefront of that. So the Hire Vets Act helps facilitate that transition by providing veterans more information on employers that offer benefits and opportunities geared toward hiring veterans. Now, many employees say they're veteran friendly, and many employers rather say they're veteran friendly, and many employers are veteran friendly, but there's really been no standard that anyone could look at to determine whether that was true or not. No standard for what employers aspire to do at their workplace, or no standard that future veterans employees can seek out. This would be much like, Mr. President, there's a LEED standard on energy efficiency. And if you have that standard on your building or at your workplace, people know exactly what that means. This bill asks the Department of Labor to establish a similar kind of standard for those that are the best and those that are nearly as good and those that are almost as good as them, to see what people are doing, a tiered recognition of employers to see what they're doing to welcome, encourage, recognize, promote veterans. Some of the criteria that could go in that evaluation would include the percentage of new hires at your company that are veterans, the percentage of the overall workforce that's made up of veterans, what type of training and leadership activities are made available that are designed to maximize what a veteran uniquely has learned as a veteran, and what other benefits and resources are offered. Things like tuition remission, things that encourage veterans to go ahead and get one other category of training or more. Creating a national standard will help veterans narrow down their employment option and focus their job search efforts on the companies that recognize the value of their military service and what that value will bring to their new workplace. Also, companies that will provide a long-term career path where those skills are used and appreciated. So this is a step in the right direction. I've talked to the Secretary of Labor just this week, who said that they intend to have this plan up and running by the end of this year, quicker than they were required to do, but certainly not quicker than we hope they would be able to do. And so this is going to be a priority at the Secretary of Labor's office, as veterans should be a priority for our society. Today we have the most powerful military in the world, but we really need to recognize, and I think do recognize, that behind that military stands supportive families. Families are the backbone of the military today. They provide the kind of support that service members need. They provide the encouragement for the difficult challenges of going from one post to another and one job to another. And I think there are ways we can recognize those families and what they do in a better way. So I was able this year again to introduce the Military Family Stability Act. Military families have changed over the years. Our military stays in service longer. The skill levels they've acquired are more valuable than might have been the case in the past as the military gets more technical. Having invested the time and training in someone in service is a more significant investment than it may have been at another time. And our policies that affect military families haven't kept pace with our investment in people who are serving. According to a study by the Military Officers Association of America, 90% of military spouses who are women are either unemployed or underemployed. 90%. More than half of those people cite concerns about their spouse's service as a deterrent to their prospective employers. Have to leave quickly without notice, don't get the ability to transfer from one state to another, their training or licensing that's happened in the state they were living in. Too often, military spouses have to end up sacrificing their own career, and I think in any case we'd understand there is some sacrifice here when you're moving from place to place, but there doesn't need to be a needless sacrifice. And so the Military Family Stability Act would allow families to address a problem I consistently hear from military spouses and people in the military serving, talking about the challenges that their spouses face in Missouri and across the nation. An ill-timed move that takes a child needlessly out of school a month early, or makes a child start a school year a month late, or prevents a husband or wife from being able to commit to a 9-month teaching contract or start a graduate program on time because the move that they had anticipated happening is delayed. And I've had people come and testify on exactly those two specific things and others that made a big difference in their family and their family's enthusiasm about the service that they were jointly giving to the country. For many families, if you make that move early, the family has to absorb the move. I think there's a better way to do this. I think we can increase stability of military families. This bill, Mr. President, enables the service member or family to either move early or remain at their current duty station for up to 6 months while the spouse or the serving parent begins a new assignment. Now, for that to happen, the spouse moving early to the new assignment, the service member moving early or staying a little bit later, has to absorb their single service person expenses for staying, but the much more significant expenses of the family goes at a reasonable time when it's better for the family to go. I'm proud that this bill has garnered widespread support from numerous military family and veteran service organizations, including the National Military Family Association, the Military Officers Association of America, and others. I'm also pleased that at this moment, as we've reintroduced the bill, Senator Gillibrand and I, that Secretary Mattis, former Marine decorated general, one of our most distinguished officers who has seen the impact on families as he served, staff members at the Department of Defense, Senator McCain, the chairman of the Armed Services Committee, and his staff have been working with us to iron out the details on a bill that they all support and agree will help our military men and women and their families. And so, Mr. President, the Hire Vets Act and the Military Family Stability Act are bipartisan. They're common sense measures that really get us closer to our goal of ensuring we provide the support for service members and veterans who have defended us. We'll also continue our oversight on the Veterans Administration to ensure that those who've served receive more choices, their health care benefits, and other benefits that they've earned are benefits that they will receive. And, Mr. President, there's really no reason they can't receive many of those benefits where they would prefer to go, as opposed to where the government has previously thought were the only options. Veterans' choice is important. They chose to serve. We can now give them more choice than we have in the past to decide what works again for them and their families. And so as we approach Memorial Day, I know that all the members of the Senate are appreciative of those who serve, the families who serve alongside them, and look forward to not only honoring veterans between now and next Monday, but between next Monday and a year from next Monday, continuing to do those things we can to be sure that those who serve and those who have served are fully appreciated for their service.